The dual connection, the secret streaming account that exposed my partner's false identity and a network of diverted intelligence. My partner, Alex, was the epitome of digital asceticism. He had an almost philosophical aversion to entertainment technology, preferring to spend his evenings reading bound volumes of German philosophy or practicing meditation on our terrace. He had no social media accounts, despised personal email, and bragged about not knowing how to use the television remote. Our shared profile on a streaming service was exclusively for historical documentaries and art films, always watched at my initiative. This strict control over his digital world always struck me as proof of his integrity and intellectual focus. That facade cracked on a rainy autumn morning. Alex had left for one of his 3-day academic conferences, leaving the house in its usual state of monastic order. I was trying to reorganize our budget and needed to access the smart TV to check a monthly charge. When I tried to log into our main streaming account, the system displayed an unexpected message: the maximum number of simultaneous screens has been reached. Disconnect another device to continue. I was confused. Our rules were clear: only 2 devices logged in, my tablet and our living room TV. Who else could be using the account? And more importantly, who would be watching something right then, in the middle of a Tuesday morning? I accessed the master profile and navigated to the Manage Devices section. The list that opened was long and completely unfamiliar to me. There were smartphones and laptops with random usernames, indicating recent access from cities I had never visited: IP Chicago 03, Mobile Toronto, PC New York Beta. But the item that froze me was one at the top of the list, with active access: The Alchemist, Profile 5. This profile was logged in through an IP network that appeared to originate from a sophisticated commercial address, far from our apartment. Alex had only 4 active profiles: one for me, one for him, one for our parents, and one for our nephew. The 5th profile, The Alchemist, was completely unknown. Curiosity turned into a cold fear. I clicked back to the master profile and, feeling the guilt of intrusion, accessed The Alchemist. The viewing history was a catalog that contradicted everything I knew about Alex. There were no documentaries on Kant or Hegel. Instead, there was an obsession with breaking news, live streams of obscure political conferences, advanced cryptography tutorials, and, most bizarre of all, a series of films and documentaries about the lives and methods of historical figures known for their mastery of espionage and identity manipulation. The watch lists were filled with videos like how to create false digital identities and anonymity strategies in open-source networks. The ascetic intellectual I knew was, in truth, a voracious consumer of sensitive information, obsessed with secrets. His aversion to technology was not a philosophical principle, it was a smokescreen to hide his real digital life. I decided to go further. I noticed that the recovery email for the streaming account wasn't mine, but a generic address Alex had told me belonged to a technical support service. I used ethical phishing software, which I had learned to use in a former consulting job, to try to access that email inbox. After a few hours of frantic work and mounting guilt, I succeeded. The inbox was a repository of coded correspondence. There were emails with encrypted attachments, message exchanges with lawyers about the purchase of overseas assets, and references to wind reports and route adjustments. What appeared to be communication about navigation or weather was, in fact, ciphered language. One recent email, with an attachment of a satellite location map, was signed with a name that wasn't Alex. The sender referred to Alex by a name I had never heard: Mikhail S. Mikhail. Not Alex. My head spun. I was engaged to a ghost. The investigation consumed me. Who was Mikhail? And why was he pretending to be Alex? I remembered a story Alex had told me long ago about an academic colleague who had died in a car accident abroad. The story was vague, Alex's emotion minimal, but he often used it as an example of how fragile academic life could be. I used the name Mikhail S. and began searching death records. It took hours, but I found one. There was a death record for Mikhail S. from a car accident in Bulgaria 5 years earlier. And attached to the record was a photo. The photo was of Alex. The man I knew as Alex was, in fact, Mikhail. He had assumed the identity of his colleague, the real Alex, whom he claimed had died, to fake his own death and start over. But why? Mikhail's obsession with espionage and identity manipulation on the streaming account suggested a flight, not a simple new beginning. I began tracing the IP address of The Alchemist on the streaming account. The address led me to an ultra-secret data security consulting firm that handled classified government contracts. My mind connected the dots: the profile, the name Mikhail, the interest in espionage, the ciphered language. The man I loved wasn't just an imposter, he was a spy. When Alex/Mikhail returned from the conference, he seemed tired and distant. I watched him during dinner, trying to find any trace of Mikhail S. in his eyes, but I saw only Alex's weary gentleness. He tried to kiss me, but I pulled away. I know about Profile 5. The Alchemist, I said, my voice low and tense. And I know about Mikhail. You're not Alex, are you? You used his death to fake your own, and you're living a false life. His face went white, and he dropped his fork to the floor with a loud clatter. He didn't try to deny it. He sat down, and for the first time I saw the real tension and fear he carried. He told me a story of persecution and betrayal in his country of origin, where he had been a data scientist working on a national security project that became corrupted. He discovered his work was being used for criminal purposes and tried to report it. He was betrayed by his superiors, forced to flee, and to fake his own death. He used the identity of his friend Alex, who had died in the accident, to start over. I truly love you. But I couldn't put you at risk. I couldn't drag you into my war, he said, tears streaming down his face. He was a political refugee, a man living under the threat of being discovered and silenced. The streaming account was his only secure link to the outside world, his only way to monitor whether his pursuers were closing in. I felt a wave of relief and compassion. He wasn't a criminal, but a victim. I embraced him, promising I would help him fight and stay safe. In the months that followed, Alex/Mikhail's life was a constant struggle against the ghost of his past. I helped him build a new firewall and strengthen his digital defenses. He seemed grateful and relieved to have someone by his side. But the man he had become was cold and distant, and I began to wonder whether his story was truly the whole truth. As we sat watching one of his obsessive political news programs, he made a casual remark about the fragility of streaming security structures when it came to IP tracking. He sounded like an expert, not a fugitive. He smiled, but his eyes flicked slightly to the left, the nervous tick I had learned to recognize in moments of crucial omission. The tick that signaled he was protecting me from something far bigger than a political corruption scheme. What he didn't tell me, and what kept him trapped, was the real reason for the escape and the false identity. The story about being a betrayed data scientist was a half-truth. Mikhail S. wasn't a victim, he was the mastermind behind the corruption scheme, a senior analyst who had siphoned off millions in government and intelligence funds. His colleague Alex's death wasn't an accident. Mikhail had murdered Alex and assumed his identity to flee with the money and access to security data. His obsession with news and anonymity strategies wasn't to protect himself from pursuers, it was to monitor the movements of international police and his former criminal associates. The security network I helped him build was, in fact, a money laundering and information diversion network, using our apartment as a secure access point. I wasn't an ally, but the naive wife of a financial war criminal, whose life was a smokescreen for his new global operation. His nervous tick wasn't fear, but cynicism, having manipulated me into becoming his unwitting accomplice.